Well, hey everyone, in this video we're going to be engaging with a question about should Christians be political in looking at a brief conversation between Pastor Jack Hibbs and Charlie Kirk.
You might say, well, we don't get involved in politics. Listen, what do you mean by that? Literally, honestly. You say that because you heard someone say that. You don't believe that. You don't want to get involved, so you say that.
I actually think that he's largely right about this. I think that's too much of a blanket statement, and it's not in keeping with sort of Christian history or even the Bible to say we don't get involved in politics. So I think that he's right to point out it's actually kind of a nonsense statement. There might be a better way of saying what people are sometimes trying to say by that, but for most of us it's not true, and it's not preferable that we would just not get involved in politics.
It's like the pastor who says, I just preach the gospel. When pastors tell me that, I tell them, you need to repent.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you're supposed to teach the full counsel of God.
Now, I do feel like this is a bit unfair, what he does there, because it may be that some pastors who say that, what they mean is, I only preach the salvation message and I don't preach anything else. It's possible that some are saying that, but I don't think that that's almost ever the case. I think that he's using shorthand to talk about people that are saying we focus on the gospel and we don't view sort of politically influencing people as our calling as a church. We believe that our focus is the gospel of Jesus, which is not just the salvation message. It's sort of like that the gospel being central is about the salvation that Jesus has brought, but the gospel is central to all of our lives. Jesus is the center of how we do everything. So I think that it's a little bit unfair of what he's doing here. I feel like the vast majority of the pastors that are handling things differently than he does and would say something like, we just preach the gospel, they don't mean that they only tell the salvation message and they don't teach the rest of the Bible.
God. After somebody's evangelized, which is preaching the gospel, then the rest of the book is making disciples out of them. How to live the life that you just now received from Christ. Okay? But see, we live in a culture where there's a bunch of saved people and that's as far as they've gone. That's if they're even saved. And you wonder, because if you ask them, how did Jesus save you? What happened when you were saved? What does it mean? What did he do on the cross? If you don't know the answers to that, then it didn't happen to you. Think about it. If you can't define what you believe in, then what is it that you believe in? So here we are. We don't get involved. You have to get involved. Because the alternative is apathy. That's what you're saying. You are justifying apathy.
So there's, I feel like what he's talking about here is, I'm conflicted. I think that there's a certain truth in what he's saying here when he's talking about not getting involved. It often can be just apathy. I'm going to stay out of it. But I think when we're talking about politics specifically, being engaged politically is not the only way to put our faith into action or to even deal with different societal issues that we're dealing with. And so, for example, you could be involved. You could have somebody saying, I'm not going to stay on the sidelines. I'm going to get involved, and I'm going to be involved at a sure pregnancy clinic, or I'm going to be involved in a mentoring program for boys who are growing up without their fathers or something like that. And it could be something that's apolitical, that doesn't have some specific tie into politics or trying to influence voting or even trying to influence legislation or anything like that. So I think that he's right, just in the sense of saying we're not supposed to just sort of say, hey, people are going to do what they're going to do. California is a lost cause or the United States is a lost cause. But I don't think it's right to say specifically politically driven involvement is the only way to make sure that you're not apathetic.
When God says, I want you, listen to this, because you love me, the world's going to hate you, but don't be bummed about it. The world hated me before they'll ever hate you. So let me ask you something. Are you hated? If you're hated, who hates you and for what reason?
Yeah, Jack, I'm pretty hated.
Think about it. But you need to, listen, I'm not talking about on a global scale. I'm not talking about people posting bad things about you. I'm talking about in the world that you live in, the people that you have influence over. Do they hate you because you love God? Do they hate you because they can't rattle your cage? You pray for them? Do they hate you because when they're sick, you come and bring them soup? Jesus said, if you love me, they're going to hate you. Don't you want to be like Jesus? I want to be like Jesus. But it's really a strange thing because he was the most loved person that ever graced this planet. At the same time, he's the most hated. How is it? Your name is not a curse word, but his is. Now is the time for us to shine the glory of the kingdom of God. We happen to live in America. Right now, we happen to have some freedom to do that still. We don't have the freedoms we had 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Do you understand we are gradually losing these freedoms? What will you do when the freedom is gone and your chance and opportunity is over and you have no voice anymore? You're going to say, I wish I would have said something when I could have. Now's the time.
So I think that it's true. I believe that it is better for the United States to maintain freedom of religion, and I think that it's better for Christians not to be persecuted than to be persecuted. It's better for Christians to experience a level of freedom to speak up without being sent to jail for hate crimes or hate speech or things like that. So I agree with that. I think that that is better, and I think that it's totally fine for Christians to say we are going to look to influence things so that we maintain those freedoms. At the same time, I think that there might be something that's missing in what he's talking about, just in terms of when the darkness is most dark, the light shines most brightly. So I do not crave persecution. I do not crave a time where things that now that I'm saying in sermons could get me thrown in prison. I don't want to go to prison. I don't want that to happen. And at the same time, I think as he's talking about this, the light shines in the darkness. And if we end up in a point where we are much more opposed and where we are much more persecuted because of our faith, that is a unique opportunity for us to show that Jesus is worth it. So I don't want that to happen, but I also think that he's not allowing us to see the whole picture when it's sort of like we're going to look back on that time and say, I wish I should have said something. I think that that's not the full framework. I think that our ultimate goal is not to make sure that we can not experience bad consequences from what we're called to do. It's to continue to do those things. And it was a little confusing. I don't know if it becomes more clear if you watch like this whole, the whole long section of what he's going through. But when he talks about, do people hate you because you're unrattled? Do people hate you because you're caring for them? I can't tell right there if he was basically saying, if that's all you're doing, you won't be hated, or if he was saying you might be hated from doing those things. I kind of suspect that he was saying, if that's all you're doing, you won't be hated. And I think that there is some truth to that also. There is some truth to the idea of, if as Christians we're saying, we're just going to be nice to everyone. We're just going to be nice and polite to everyone. Jesus was not nice and polite to everyone. He's right to say, Jesus was opposed, Jesus was arrested, Jesus was crucified, Jesus was a threat, Jesus was dangerous. He was dangerous to evil, he was dangerous to corruption, he was dangerous to false teachers, he was dangerous to all that. We as Christians should be dangerous in that sense. We should be. There should be people who are viewing us and saying these Christians are going to be a problem because they won't shut up about what's true. They won't shut up about what's right. They're immovable, they're strong, they are compassionate, and they're caring for the poor, and that maybe doesn't feel as threatening, but they also continue to hold to the truth. So there's a lot in what he talks about that I do agree with. I think that there's a sense of proportion that I think is off base with Jack. I think that there are people that are experiencing that ministry and even have said it seemed to have become something where Jesus was in the back seat and politics were in the front seat. And that's what I think the pushback comes from. When he looks at this and people say we don't get involved, there may be some people saying that. I think what more people are probably saying is this has come to the forefront and this should not be. This should be following behind. Politics and political involvement and voting and all those things should be following behind how we walk with Jesus. And there's a lot of clarity here on what we're called to do. And when we get back here, it's not always clear what you're supposed to do in every single case. And it's not always clear how you're supposed to vote in every single case. And it's not clear what the calling of every Christian is with regard to all of these things. And so when these things then that are back here end up coming up here, then Jesus and what should be primary for us ends up getting obscured by things that we treat as ironclad, solid truths that are not quite as ironclad. They're not quite as clear. So I think that there's truth in what he's saying. As Christians, I don't think that we should take the route of just saying we're uninvolved, we're apathetic, we're just out of it, we just don't care. What's going to happen is going to happen. But I also think that we need to be very, very careful to keep the gospel the main thing. And not just the 2-minute message of salvation, but Jesus as Lord as the main proclamation that we're making.